Today on the Matt Walsh Show, the Kamala Harris campaign has attacked me and labeled me a top Trump operative after I called for the Department of Education and the entire public school system to be abolished. We'll talk about that. Also, an MSNBC reporter is shocked and appalled to discover that normal voters don't care at all about January 6th. And police in Seattle will now only respond to 911 calls if there is supporting evidence of a crime. How does that work exactly? We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. My new film, Am I Racist?, has already become the biggest political documentary in 20 years. It's a top 10 box office hit with a 98% audience score, but you can only see it in theaters. There was one movie that started it all, though, What is a Woman?, a film that really struck a chord. If you haven't seen it or want to see it again, watch What is a Woman now on Daily Wire Plus. Not a Daily Wire Plus member? Join at dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code DW30 for 30% off. With the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates mid last week, it's time to make a smart financial move and call my friends at American Financing today. With mortgage rates now in the fours, yes, the fours, now is the perfect time to consolidate your debt and reduce your monthly expense. And let's be honest, a lot of us have been forced to use credit cards because of the ridiculous prices at the grocery store, on power bills, even for childcare. It's really getting out of hand. That credit card debt, well, it's not just expensive, it's insanely expensive. But here's the good news. With mortgage rates dropping, now's the time to wipe that debt out. American Financing is helping homeowners just like you save over $800 a month on average. It's real money you could be using actually enjoy life a little. Imagine that. They're even closing some loans in as fast as 10 days. And if you start today, you may be able to delay two mortgage payments, two all payments. Plus, there are no upfront fees to find out how much you can save. None at all. Zero. Zilch. So here's what you need to do. Call American Financing today at 866-569-4711. That's 866-569-4711. Or if you're more digitally inclined, visit americanfinancing.net/Walsh. NMLS 182334, NMLSconsumeraccess.org, APR for rates in the fours start at APR 5.672%. For well-qualified borrowers, call 866-569-4711 for details about credit card costs and terms. One basic rule of survival is that when a clearly deranged individual is ranting and raving in public, you shouldn't engage with them. Generally speaking, there's no benefit to doing so. You can't persuade them not to be delusional as much as you might like to. You can only make things worse. Unfortunately, every now and then, despite your best efforts, sometimes this strategy doesn't work out. You know, we've all been there. You're trying to mind your own business. Out of nowhere, you catch a stranger's eye and they start talking to you or about you. They might verbalize their unhinged delusions about who you are or what you do for a living. And in those cases, sometimes it can be impossible to resist saying a word or two in response. You know, it's not going to help anything. You know, you probably shouldn't do it, but it's human nature to respond when someone, even a lunatic, is talking about you. And last night, I found myself in a situation just like that when the Kamala HQ account on Twitter, which is the official account of the Kamala Harris campaign, posted a message in response to a segment from my show yesterday. This is the same account that even CNN reports is guilty of repeatedly deceiving, their words, people with obviously false posts. It's the same account that Tim Pool is suing because they wildly misrepresented something that he said on his show. They are pathological, delusional liars in every sense. And last night, totally unprovoked, they came after me. And here's what they wrote in response to my show yesterday. Quote, "Top Trump operative echoing Project 2025. Not only should the Department of Education be abolished, but the entire public school system should be abolished." Now, before I play the clip that they embedded in that tweet, I have to say a few things. First of all, it would be news to the Trump campaign that I'm one of their operatives. I don't work for the Trump campaign, by the way. I don't coordinate with the Trump campaign. I've never spoken to the Trump campaign at any point. During the primary, I supported Ron DeSantis, as most people know. So in no sense am I a Trump campaign operative, though I am a supporter and I'm going to vote for him. At the same time, I have to admit that this lie is a little flattering. I mean, if they're going to falsely label me a Trump operative, I'm glad they promoted me to a top operative instead of just a regular one, at least. I'm not some rank and file Trump operative over here. I'm the cream of the crop in the eyes of the Kamala Harris campaign. So it's nice to be getting some damned respect around here finally, I have to say. But in any event, here's the footage they embedded in their tweet to demonstrate that I'm a top Trump operative who is echoing Project 2025. I'm responding here to a clip from a recent Trump rally where he says the education system is failing in this country, and he says that he wants to abolish the Department of Education, and I very much agree with that. And so here's the short clip from my show yesterday that they posted. Here it is. And that's because our education system is a catastrophic failure. And it's such a failure that it has created a civilization-level crisis. It's a crisis that cannot be entirely fixed by abolishing the Department of Education, because you're still going to have the public school system that will still exist. And ultimately, the public school system itself needs to be abolished. The whole thing, the entire system should be dismantled. A couple of things just off the top. First of all, I look pretty good in the jacket, you have to say. I've gone full Hollywood now, you know, in the movies, and now I'm wearing the jacket, the whole thing. Total diva now, I guess. Second, I wish they had kept it going, because actually I go on in that clip to say that I want to burn the public school system to the ground, metaphorically, and dance around its ashes like a wild Indian. I say that I didn't say the wild Indian part, but I'm saying that part now. And they could have included that. I don't know why they didn't. But anyway, like everything else that this Kamala HQ account has uploaded in the past few weeks, this post backfired almost immediately. Pretty much every reply was along the lines of, yep, the public school system, the Department of Education are terrible and should be abolished. The goal of the Kamala Harris campaign is, of course, to portray this as an inherently extreme position, as if the existence of the Department of Education is some sort of inevitable fact of life in this country, but it's not. For most of this country's history, up until 1979, we did not have a Department of Education at all. Actually, to be more precise, Andrew Johnson also launched a Department of Education back in 1867. It had just 4 employees, the commissioner and 3 clerks, very limited mandate. It was supposed to collect statistics on the condition and progress of education in the United States and then publish that information. But even with that limited mandate, politicians at the time thought the Department of Education had too much power. They didn't see any reason for the department to exist at all. As Politico reports, many in Congress saw its existence as an unconstitutional power grab and worried that its data-gathering authority gave Washington a new and dangerous kind of leverage. Andrew Rogers, a Democrat from New Jersey, put it this way, quote, "I am content to leave this matter of education where our fathers left it, where the history of our country left it, in the school systems of the different towns, cities, and states." So ultimately, the first Department of Education lasted just a year before Congress realized it was a horrible idea and abolished it. Instead of having a bloated and unnecessary federal bureaucracy spending tens of billions of dollars every year, education mostly remained a local concern from 1868 to 1979. And all told, we did pretty well as a country in that period. In fact, during that time frame, we went from horses to cars to planes to rocket ships flying to the moon. And we won 2 world wars, in our spare time. It was a period of human advancement in this country never seen before. And we did it all without the Department of Education, if you can imagine. Then in 1979, after this period of uninterrupted prosperity and innovation, Jimmy Carter revived the federal Department of Education. And by that point, we didn't have a lot of politicians in Washington anymore who wanted to limit their own power. Instead, they wanted to expand it at all costs. So the DOE has stuck around to disastrous results. And the New York Sun reported last year, quote, "The recent report by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, sometimes referred to as the nation's report card, is a devastating assessment of the condition of our nation's schools. In short, there has been virtually no educational progress with our nation's children in more than 30 years, and urban districts are the worst performers. Virtually every major city shows declining proficiency for their students, even as school spending continues to increase." Yes, you heard that correctly. There has been virtually no educational progress in this country, in the education system, in more than 3 decades. The Department of Education has been around this entire time, getting billions and billions of dollars in funding every year, and it has not done anything to improve education. They've hired a bunch of LGBTQ overseers to police misgendering in kindergarten or whatever, but when it comes to education, it's been a debacle. Instead, in major school districts all over the country, corruption has flourished. Quoting again from The Sun, the report ranked the Detroit public schools as the worst performing of all 26 large school districts, with just 5% of their 8th grade students rated proficient in reading and only 3% in math. What's surprising is the Detroit Public Schools Community District rated 99% of Detroit's teachers as highly effective or effective, the two highest ratings given to teachers. An added conundrum is that the Detroit public high schools received an F on student proficiency and yet received an A on graduation rates. In other words, students are doing terribly, worse than they've done in decades. They're still being filtered through the school system and graduated, and the teachers are rating themselves very highly. They can't even get their 8th grade students to read, and yet they're giving themselves an A+++ for performance. Graduating all these students who can't read, can't write, can't do arithmetic. And despite all this, billions of dollars from the federal government flow into Michigan schools every year. So the Department of Education isn't just tolerating failure, it is enabling it, funding it, facilitating it. Now, to be clear, the source for these claims is not Project 2025. It's not me either. The source for these claims is the Department of Education itself. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the nation's report card, is both overseen and administered by the National Center for Education Statistics. And the National Center for Education Statistics is embedded within the U.S. Department of Education. So the Department of Education itself is saying that it is doing a terrible job. They're acknowledging that public schools are failing, which is why homeschooling, by the way, is now more popular than ever. If you want the real indictment on the public school system, it's that homeschooling is taking off and growing year over year. So how bad are things in public schools exactly? The New York Times reported in 2023 that, quote, the math and reading performance of 13-year-olds in the U.S. has hit the lowest level in decades. Again, their source is the Department of Education and the exam from the National Report Card. And there are reasons to believe that these numbers from the National Report Card, because, quote, scores on the exam do not result in any rewards or punishments for students, teachers, or schools, making them especially useful for research purposes, since there are fewer incentives to cheat or teach to the test. If there were punishments for underperforming schools, then we can assume that a lot of teachers would give their students the answers, but apparently they're not clever enough to do that, at least not yet, so the corruption and incompetence are just laid bare. Out of curiosity, I just pulled up the homepage for the National Report Card. The very first thing on the website is a chart entitled Student Performance Across Subjects. It shows changes in average scores and scores at selective percentiles by subject and grade. And here's what it looks like. You can look at it here. And as you can see, every single arrow, except one, is down, meaning there's been a significant decrease compared to last assessment year, according to the website. Average scores in math and reading are down for grades 4 through 8 in every percentile. The only exception is the 90th percentile in reading among 4th graders, and that experienced no significant difference year over year. So not a single category has improved. Now, I could go on and on about the various metrics that show our public school system and the Department of Education are both failing. Every single statistic like this is clear evidence that we need to scrap the system and start over. But the failures actually go even deeper than test scores and academic proficiency. All the way back in 2004, again citing the Department of Education itself, they released a comprehensive report that we've talked about plenty of times on this show before, showing that 10% of students in public schools nationwide in grades K through 12 were subject to sexual misconduct by a school employee. That's millions of children being sexually victimized in the school, according to the DOE itself. Now, that's the kind of report that was done 20 years ago. You'd expect that would lead to annual, if not monthly, follow-ups by the Department of Education. But as far as I can tell, they haven't followed up at all with any more comprehensive assessments about this. So they discovered that millions of kids are being victimized in school, and they said, okay, well, So now we know. Moving on. And as I discussed earlier this year, that's not because sexual abuse in public schools has gone away. If anything, there are clear indications it's become substantially more common and that public schools are covering it up. So put it all together, and it's evident that the education system is catastrophically failing to do the single thing it is supposed to do, which is to equip each new generation with the knowledge and intellectual tools they need to be productive and happy and well-adjusted human beings. The failure of the education system should be considered a major scandal. It's the greatest scandal facing the country today. But the problem is that the Democrats don't consider failure to be failure, because what they actually want is the education system to churn out shallow, stupid, obedient serfs. And it's succeeding in doing just that. All that said, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there's one thing that the Kamala HQ account tweeted about me that is in fact accurate. It is true that I am indeed a proponent of Project 2025, as they said. So they got me there. And in fact, if you want to find out more about our dastardly, secretive plot, now that we've been unmasked for all the world to see, you can find out at project2025.com. And, I shouldn't just give out the URL like that, I know, but because it's such a big secret. But as a top Trump operative, as opposed to a middle manager in the Trump organization, I do have declassification authority. So I can tell you that the website to learn all about it is project2025.com. Of course, send that to all your friends. But whatever you do, do not send this to Kamala HQ account. Do not start peppering their comments with links to project2025.com. Don't troll them incessantly by constantly putting the link to project2025.com. We don't want them to see what we're really up to over here in the Trump campaign. It'd be really, really bad if they tweeted out that link and exposed what we Trump operatives are doing. We can't let them know about project2025.com, but everybody else, everybody on our side who wants access to our secret blueprint can go over to project2025.com anytime they want, read it, internalize it. And then when the Department of Education is abolished and children can once again read, write, and do arithmetic in this country, we must never speak about our sinister Project 2025 plan ever again. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. I've been thinking a lot about the holidays lately, not just because of the incessant commercialization or the yearly debate over whether it's okay to say Merry Christmas anymore. I've been pondering what it means to give a truly meaningful gift in this era of soulless consumerism. That's what I've been thinking about in my spare time. And that's until I stumbled upon Paint Your Life. Now, I'm not one for sappy sentimentality, but even I have to admit this is something special. Imagine giving someone a hand-painted portrait of a moment that actually matters, not some AI-generated nonsense or a cheap print, but a real painting by a real artist. All I have to do is choose a photo of our family, and Paint Your Life turns it into a painting. The process is surprisingly simple. No bureaucratic red tape, no endless forms to fill out. Just upload the photo, choose an artist, and you're set. That's it. I received a painting from them over a year ago and still have it hung in my living room. In fact, I have multiple paintings from Paint Your Life hanging throughout the house. You can even combine multiple photos or add things that weren't in the original. Want to add a lost loved one to a family portrait? They can do that. Want to add embellishments, change a wardrobe, put yourself in a location that you've always wanted to go to? Well, they could do that too. The best part, it's not just a gift, it's a statement that says, hey, I actually put some thought into this instead of just grabbing whatever was on sale at the big box store. Get started with your holiday shopping early this season. Give the most meaningful gift you have ever given from paintyourlife.com. And there's no risk. If you don't love the final painting, which you will, your money's guaranteed refunded. Order now to get Paint Your Life's early bird holiday offer, 20% off your painting. That's right. For a limited time, get 20% off and free shipping. To get the special offer, text the word MATT to 87204. That's MATT to 87204. Text MATT to 87204. Paint Your Life. Celebrate the moments that matter most. Well, it's about that time of the week when a video goes viral of Kamala Harris answering a question 5 years ago. As we know, 5 years ago was the last time she answered any questions, really. It's the last time she was honest about her agenda and her ideological views. So you got to go back 5 years to figure out what she actually believes and what she's going to do if she, God forbid, ends up in the presidency. So this time it's a video of her being interviewed by The Roots. And this is back in 2019. It's a quick clip. Let's watch.
Do you think that sex work ought to be decriminalized?
I think so. I do. I think that we have to understand, though, that it is not as simple as that. But when you're talking about consenting adults, I think that, yes, we should really consider that we can't criminalize consensual behavior.
So she wanted to decriminalize sex work. Does she still want to? Well, Axios reached out and asked if this is still her position. Did not get an answer. Shocking. But that is what she wanted to do, decriminalize sex work, otherwise known as prostitution. Sex work is a misnomer. It's not work. This is not a legitimate occupation. Offering up your body to be used as nothing more than an object it's in many ways the opposite of work. There's no real work being done. But whether we call it work or not, should it be decriminalized? And the answer is obviously not. The decriminalization agenda has been a disaster for communities all across the country. We don't need to get into the weed thing, into the weeds, pun intended. We don't need to do that. We talked about it last week, but it's the same sort of thing here. And I think prostitution is much worse than marijuana, granted, but, and that's all the more reason to keep it criminalized. Because it's basic, simple math. If you decriminalize something, you get more of it. If something is legal, if more people will do it. And they'll do it more openly, too. That's the other thing. It will become a more prevalent, more visible part of your society if it is decriminalized, whatever the thing is. This is a fundamental reality of the human condition. Remove the barriers, remove the disincentives, and remove the punishments, and remove the negative consequences, and more people will engage in the activity. There are, and you hear people try to argue that point and say, sometimes you'll even hear it claimed that it might work the opposite way. That this is one argument that the pro-weed people made, was that, well, actually be decriminalized. If anything, maybe less people are doing it. Fewer people, are doing it. Because there's less of a mystique around it. And, it's not as rebellious anymore. And so, no, that's just, you don't understand human nature at all if that's what you think. That's a very stupid thing to say. Obviously, when you decriminalize it, you get more of it. Right now, there are plenty, when it comes to prostitution, there are plenty of people out there who don't go to prostitutes basically only because it's illegal. Now, sure, there are plenty of people who go to prostitutes even though it is illegal and they're doing it anyway. But there's a whole other chunk of people who, for them, the illegality is like the one thing holding them back. And it's a big chunk. It shouldn't be the only thing holding you back. If you're if you're a decent person with any kind of moral compass, then it doesn't matter if prostitution is legal or not. You have no interest. But not everybody is, and so there's a whole bunch of people who we don't know how many. You find out when you legalize it, but a whole bunch of people who the only reason they're not doing it is because it's illegal. So you just have to ask yourself, before you decriminalize anything, do we want, whatever it is, whatever the thing is we're talking about, whether it's marijuana or hard drugs or prostitution or anything else, before you decriminalize it, you ask yourself, do we want this thing to be more prevalent and more visible in society? Will that improve anything? Will it make our lives better in any way? That is the question. It's like the question, what movie was it? It was American History X, I think, where Ed Norton is a skinhead, and then he goes to prison and comes out he comes out as Robin DiAngelo after going to prison. So it's a cheesy, overwrought movie in a lot of ways. That I don't think it's ever. By the way, has that ever happened that someone becomes less racist in prison? It's never happened in the history of prisons. But anyway, there's a scene, if I recall that movie, it's been a long time since I saw it, but where Ed Norton is kind of waking up from his Nazi stupor, and he's asked by somebody, is there anything you've done in your life that's made your life better? And that was and then he thought, wow, okay, Yeah, being a skinhead hasn't made my life better. You're right. And it was an awakening moment for him, if I'm remembering that movie correctly, which I might not be. But either way, that's kind of the question we should be applying to society. You should actually be asking that question about any kind of law, any proposal, any piece of legislation. That should always be the first question. Okay? Even before we get into arguments about freedom and consenting adults, as we heard from Kamala Harris. That's actually not the first thing we should ask ourselves. The first thing you ask yourself is, will this make anything better at all? And if the answer is no, then obviously you should not do it. Why? Because the well-being of the people in your society should be the top priority. Any law that's passed, the top priority should always be the well-being of the people who are affected by the law. I mean, this is so basic, but it's amazing that people will argue against that. They'll say that, no, well, the well-being is not that important. So let's pass laws that will actually hurt everybody and just do it anyway. Why? So you think we're like morally required to destroy ourselves? What? Why? Can you talk that through a little bit? So the Post-Millennial has this report. Seattle police will no longer respond to calls from alarm companies unless there's supporting evidence of a crime. According to a September 13th letter from interim Seattle Police Chief Sue Rahr, beginning October 1st, SPD will only dispatch officers to calls from alarm companies if there's supporting evidence of a crime, such as audio, video, panic alarms, or eyewitnesses that a person is illegally entering or attempting to enter a residence or commercial property. Rahr wrote, with depleted resources, we cannot prioritize a patrol response when there's a very low probability that criminal activity is taking place. So how do you, usually the supporting evidence of the crime happens afterwards. Like, you don't have to give evidence of the crime in order to have the police even show up. They show up and then the evidence happens downstream. But that's not the way it's going to work in Seattle now. And we're seeing this more and more across the country, of course. Often the police get blamed for it when we see these things about they're not responding to certain calls. They're not going to be responding to calls at certain times of night and all this kind of stuff. And the police get blamed for it, but it's not their fault. This is what happens when you start gutting your police departments, when you have a defund the police movement. And we should be clear about why they're being gutted. And it's not just defund the police. That plays a major role, but more than that, it's the villainization of the police. It's the lose-lose situation that cops are put in. It's the fact that policing has become perhaps the least desirable profession on the planet. You're risking your life to protect society, but society hates you for it. And if you ever have to use lethal force to defend yourself or other innocent people, you'll be dragged through the mud and potentially thrown in prison. The moment that a scumbag criminal gets violent, it's a catch-22, because if you respond with force, you go to jail. If you don't respond, you go to the morgue. So where's the win? You can't win. There isn't one. Why would anyone do this job? I have a lot of respect for cops, but I can tell you right now, if any of my 4 sons wanted to become cops, I would do everything in my power to dissuade them from becoming police officers. Because I don't want them to become the next Derek Chauvin. Right? I was just watching footage, body cam footage that is now circulating on Twitter. Horrific footage. Cop in New Mexico, I believe it was, back in the spring, stops to help a stranded motorist on the highway at 4 or 5 in the morning. And as I said, this happened several months ago. It's the first that I'm hearing of it. And he wants to help the guy. He's going to give him a ride to somewhere. There's no, it's the middle of the night and he's got nowhere to go. And the guy that he's stopping, Jeremy Smith, is the stranded motorist, the supposedly stranded motorist, pulls out a gun and shoots the police officer, dumps his body in the road, drives off in a police cruiser. Short time later, Smith is apprehended by the cops. He's shot in the process. Unfortunately, he survives, and now he faces life behind bars or execution. Obviously, it should be execution. But this is what cops are facing. It's this kind of thing where, what's going to be the excuse for Jeremy Smith this time? Is he going to be the next BLM martyr? And he is a black guy, so are we going to hear, oh, he's scared he was scared for his life. He was terrified. The police officer wasn't even trying to arrest him or detain him. It's just trying to help him. And so when you're a cop and you see that kind of thing, you know that even stopping to help someone, there's a chance that they might try to kill you. How does that not affect your attitude, your approach? And then people turn around and put all the blame on the cops, or even if there's a video of maybe a cop being a little bit short, a little bit rude, a little bit gruff during a traffic stop or something, and they get a hard time for that. But can we really not understand why they might, what would your attitude be if you know that just doing your job, even in the context of trying to help someone, there is a not insignificant chance that they will pull out a gun and try to shoot you in the head? So what effect is that going to have on your psychology? Do you think it might make you a little bit, it might be having kind of a bad day sometimes? Can we not understand that? I don't know how every cop in the country doesn't just walk around pissed off all the time now. I don't know. I'm always impressed when I encounter any of them who are at all friendly. Because I tell you something, if I had that job at this point, I don't think I'd be friendly at all. Seeing what we've seen in society over the last several years, seeing society itself, not everybody, but so many, take the side of the worst scumbags on earth against the cops who are trying to protect us from those scumbags. And you see that over and over and over again. If that were me, I would have quit a long time ago, because I would say, you know what, screw you people. I'm not putting my life on the line for this. No way. No gratitude at all. You don't care. You're just waiting for me to slip up so you can destroy my life. I want no part of it. I'll go get a job doing something else. It doesn't even pay that well. Why am I could do private security somewhere and get paid more. So, and you see this on the right even sometimes, not nearly as much, but there are even some so-called conservatives that will say, oh, I hate cops. What do you hate cops? What kind of dumb, childish thing is that to say? What, you think we should have none? What's your plan here, you morons? We should have nobody enforcing the law? What happens next? The Jeremy Smiths of the world? You want no one around to catch those people? You want to deal with the Jeremy Smith? Who's going to deal with them? You need cops for that. So saying you hate cops is like saying you hate firefighters. What, so you just don't want anyone to put fires out? What kind of moronic attitude is that? I just have no patience for it. I have less patience for it than a lot of the cops do. Which again, it's a good thing I'm not a police officer. I don't have the temperament for it, as maybe you've noticed. Okay, this is a fun video. Let's do something fun. This is very fun. Here's MSNBC interviewing a group of voters, union workers actually, and the reporter asks about January 6th, and here's what the voters say.
Talk to me about your level of interest in the criminal charges and so forth.
February 6th?
January 6th.
So I remember that day. I know he was the standing president. I'm not familiar with the charges that are being brought against him for that. I'm not following that charge I know there's multiple court cases going on. I'm just not familiar with it.
I mean, that doesn't sound like it's going to be a factor in deciding who to vote for.
No.
Okay, so when I say January 6th, what do you think?
Oh, I just remember seeing it on the news, like all the riots and stuff. Don't really know what it was about or what happened, though.
How did it make you feel when you saw it?
I don't know. I don't really feel any way about it. People showed their emotion, I guess. Probably in the wrong way, but it happened.
That's great. You know what a dagger that is to that reporter for MSNBC? You know how personally insulting that is? Especially when the guy's like, February 6th, was it? No, January 6th. It's January 6th. I mean, it's not knowing the date of January 6th for that reporter. It's like if you don't know your anniversary. It's like how your wife reacts. If you say, hey, honey, I got big plans for our anniversary on July 2nd. You mean June 2nd? It's that kind of thing. That's the way they react. Because for them, this is the most important date on the calendar. This is everything. And it's it's a time of mourning for them, but it's also a celebratory also. So it's everything wrapped into one. January 6th is like January 6th to the left. It's like it's Christmas and 9/11. It's the greatest, the lowest low and the greatest high. It's the celebration and mourning. It's their whole life. It's like the whole. I mean, for a reporter, especially a DC-based reporter, January 6th is their whole existence now. It really defines everything about them. It's the most important thing that's ever happened in the world. They really, truly believe that. We make a joke about it, but that's actually what they think. And in their own lives, I'm sure they still talk about it. You know, I've never talked to any of these people in my private life. I never would want to. But my God, can you imagine? Like, in that woman, in her private life, she probably still talks about January 6th. They probably do the whole thing people do with 9/11 where they say, you know, you remember where you were? You remember where you were when you heard? And with 9/11, if you were at least old enough to remember it, then everybody has this story, right? And certainly for the 10 years after 9/11, it was a constant conversation of, do you remember where you were? For these people, they do that with January 6th. Whereas for all the rest of us, if somebody said, do you remember where you were on January 6th when you heard they were storming the Capitol? If somebody asked me that, I would say, I don't know. I don't really. It's probably at work, I guess. I don't know. I think I was on Twitter and I saw it, and I don't remember exactly. So this is the world that they live in, but the average voter just doesn't care that much about it. So this is a very sort of niche thing that the media is entirely obsessed with. And most voters are not going to vote in November with January 6th in mind. They don't even know what date. What was the date of January 6th? They're not even sure. Okay, here's another clip we'll play briefly. Joe Biden appeared on The View and was asked a question that nobody has asked him. This is the first time, I think, that we've seen anyone ask this question of Joe Biden, which is the number one question that everybody should be asking him. And we finally got it from The View. Watch.
Did you feel that your hand was forced, and what is your relationship with Speaker Pelosi now?
My relationship is fine. Look, I never fully believed the assertions that somehow there was this overwhelming reluctance of my running again. I didn't sense that. Mm-hmm. And although the polling, as I said, Biden's polling was different, the fact of the matter is my polling was about, we're always within range of beating this guy. Yeah. And, what I did was, I think there were, it makes sense. There were some folks who would like to see me step aside so they have a chance to move on. I get that. That's just human nature. But that wasn't the reason that I stepped down. I stepped down because I started thinking about it. You know, it's hard to think of, I know you're only 30, but it's hard to think of, it's hard for me to even say how old I am. He's finally asked, were you pressured to step aside? And his answer was yes.
He didn't say that, but his answer was yes. And just that pause there, and he pauses, and that tells you everything you need to know. Which is also amazing that he had to think about, well, not really amazing, this is Joe Biden we're talking about, but still, the fact that he had to think about the answer, you would think that they would have him prepped with at least the answer to that question. Here's what you say this. And maybe they tried to, but again, this is Joe Biden we're talking about. So his actual answer is that he was pressured. In fact, he says in his answer that he didn't agree with the reasoning that was given for him stepping aside. He didn't agree with it. We know he didn't agree with it because he said multiple times in the lead up to that final announcement that was mysteriously made on Twitter, and then we didn't hear from him for several days. But in the lead up to that, he said many times that he wasn't going to step aside. He rejected the premise for it. And that pretty much confirmed it. So the President of the United States was pressured to give up his run for re-election. And the current woman who now has that position was illegitimately installed in it. And that's just what happened. And now it happened. It's a major scandal. It's another major scandal. But it's kind of baked into the cake now, and we're all supposed to move on with our lives, I guess, even though we shouldn't. If you want the easiest, most straightforward way to put your sports knowledge to work, you need to download America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, Prize Picks. I mean it when I tell you that it's incredibly simple. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. That's it. No complicated rules, no hoops to jump through. Just pick and watch the winnings roll in. Now, listen to this offer that's so good, it'll make even the most cynical among you do a double take. For every single passing yard Caleb Williams throws, you get an automatic win every football weekend in September. 1 yard, 1 win. Doesn't get much better than that, but don't drag your feet because this deal vanishes when September ends. And if that wasn't enough to get your attention, right now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. But Prize Picks doesn't just make winning easy, they make getting paid a breeze too. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. I'm talking 15 minutes from win to cash in hand. If only the DMV could operate with that kind of efficiency, we might actually get something done in this country. But after hearing about this app and seeing all the great reviews, our show's camera assistant, Mike, is really excited to set up his own Prize Picks account and build a lineup with some of his favorite players like Daniel Jones and Andy Dalton, some of the best players in the league. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Walsh to get $50 instantly when you pay $5. That's code Walsh on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you pay $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Well, I'm grateful that Am I Racist has become the biggest political documentary opening in 20 years. It's still in the top 10 at the box office and has a 98% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, you can only see Am I Racist in theaters, and you should get your tickets at amiracist.com. If you haven't seen it, go to theaters this weekend. Or if you have seen it, go again. And if you've seen it twice, go a third time. Don't be lazy. But there's another film that started this journey, What is a Woman? The documentary that unexpectedly became a cultural phenomenon, tackles one of the most debated questions of our time, and the journey to find an answer has resonated with audiences worldwide. The good news, you can stream it now on Daily Wire Plus. Not a Daily Wire Plus member, go to dailywire.com/subscribe to join us today. Use code DW30 for 30% off your new Daily Wire Plus membership. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. We're at the stage in the presidential election campaign where every photo op featuring the candidates at the top of the ticket is carefully choreographed, and that's especially true for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are by far the most choreographed candidates in modern politics. There aren't any accidents from Kamala Harris or Tim Walz at this point. Every message they send is intentional, and that's why it was striking to see Alex Soros, the son of billionaire left-wing mega donor George Soros, upload these photos to social media a couple days ago. And you don't need an eye for photography to see that there's something off about these images. Tim Walz looks sheepish. He's standing awkwardly far away from Soros. Meanwhile, Soros is eagerly showing off the sweeping views from his home in New York City, which looks as sterile as it possibly could. Soros is grinning even as Tim Walz looks uncomfortable. And if you swap out the skyscraper view for like a Shark Tank, it might as well be a scene from Dr. No. The supervillain vibes are very apparent. Now, if you're feeling more charitable, you might chalk these images up to one awkward meeting and move on. But Alex Soros has been having a lot of these meetings with top Democrats lately. And in every case, Soros has been proudly uploading the photos on social media with the Democrats looking a bit like they're in a hostage situation. Alex Soros posted all these images that you can see in the last month or so, the picture with Josh Shapiro, Jasmine Crockett, Gretchen Whitmer, and so on. But Soros has a particular affinity for Walz. He keeps requesting meetings like this. And Walz, the supposed everyman candidate, has been more than happy to oblige. During the DNC just a few weeks ago, Soros posted these photos with the vice presidential candidate. And taken together, it's clear what's going on in these images. Alex Soros is showing off his trophies. He's not uploading these photos to convince a single voter to show up at the polls. He's doing it to demonstrate that he owns the most prominent politicians in the Democrat Party. These politicians know these photos aren't flattering, but they have to appear in them anyway. I mean, Tim Walz in particular is supposed to be the down-to-earth middle-class guy. Why do you want him in photos with the son of a billionaire in his swanky apartment in downtown New York? It just doesn't make any sense. But they have to show up to his home or his dimly lit hotel rooms and pretend to smile because he controls them. Now, in recent weeks, it's become very very clear why top Democrats are so willing to portray themselves publicly as lapdogs of the Soros family. As it turns out, the Soros family is not just cutting big checks, although they're obviously doing that too. Instead, the Soros empire is making its most concerted effort yet to subvert the election in November. And they're getting a lot of help from Democrats in the government bureaucracy. The New York Post reports that with just a few weeks to go until Election Day, the Federal Communications Commission has approved a deal that fast-tracks George Soros' acquisition of more than 200 radio stations that reach more than 165 million Americans in 40 markets. This is a transaction involving Odyssey radio stations after the company declared bankruptcy. The approval of this acquisition was reportedly a party-line vote that passed with 3 Democrats' votes on the FCC over the objection of 2 Republicans. One of those Republicans on the FCC, Brendan Carr, says that nothing like this has ever happened before. The issue is that there's a rule prohibiting foreign owners from controlling more than 25% of U.S. radio stations. You could argue that it should be 0%, but 25% is the number. And Democrats on the FCC have established vetting procedures, including national security reviews, to screen transactions like this to prevent that rule from being violated. But in this case, they've effectively waived all of those restrictions just in time for the election. Watch.
You've indicated there's a transaction where a Soros-backed group would take ownership of over 200 radio stations across 40 different markets after the FCC originally indicating that transaction could be reviewed and approved at the bureau level without a commission vote. It's now become clear that that is a decision before the full commission, and it's one that I would assume now or in the near future the commission would approve. I think what's interesting about it is that the FCC here is not following its normal process for reviewing a transaction. We have established over a number of years one way in which you can get approval from the FCC when you have in excess of 25% foreign ownership, which this transaction does. And it seems to me that the FCC is poised to create, for the first time, an entirely new shortcut.
Yeah, thank you. As you pointed out here and previously, these proceedings for transfer of ownership have been expedited. What exactly makes this case so deserving of an expedited proceeding so far, from what you could tell?
There is nothing about this transaction that is out of the ordinary. It's the type of thing that we see all the time, and the FCC has a process for this. The full commission itself has never signed off on a shortcut like this. What we usually do is we require people to file a petition with us. We bring in national security agencies. They can review the foreign ownership. It's probably no big deal here, but we review that foreign ownership, and then we vote. Here, they're trying to do something that's never been done before at the commission level.
So Carr also noted that some of these stations are located in states like Florida, Virginia, and Pennsylvania, and several of these stations carry or carried conservative talk radio. So just to add to the backroom deal nature of this vote, the FCC isn't even officially confirming that it happened. In a statement, the FCC said, no decision is final until the commission releases it, which we have not. Now, some Democrats have pointed out that the FCC has fast-tracked various other post-bankruptcy acquisitions involving foreign entities, including bankruptcies involving Cumulus Media and iHeartMedia. But those situations don't appear to be comparable. For one thing, none of them occurred weeks before a presidential election. None of them had the same political implications. And the mechanics of the fast-tracking were different. Nathan Symington, another Republican FCC commissioner, explained to Fox News that, quote, the FCC has a practice of permitting entities temporarily to exceed foreign ownership caps when emerging from bankruptcy. But that wasn't the only way in which this item was fast-tracked. Commission leadership tried to approve the item at the state level with nothing but a 48-hour notice to commissioners on a summer Friday. There's also no factual record on the item because there was almost no attempt to do a real public interest analysis. Not a single commissioner outside the chairwoman was invited to even think about the issue until staff was directed to handle it on our behalf without our votes. That's the true fast track. Now, things get even worse when you look more closely at the kinds of messages that these radio stations might start broadcasting once the Soros family acquires this ownership stake. One way to do that is to look at what other Soros-funded organizations are doing to impact the election in November. One of those organizations is called the Haitian Bridge Alliance. They've been one of the most vocal critics of Donald Trump's position on Haitian migration into this country. The head of the group recently claimed that Haitian immigration to Springfield has revitalized both the economy and the labor force in that small town. According to Randoland US, which did the research on this, the Haitian Bridge Alliance has received more than $500,000 from Soros' Open Society Foundation. Here's a report Tuesday from MSNBC's Katie Fang about what the Haitian Bridge Alliance is up to lately. Quote, in a fascinating legal move, the Haitian Bridge Alliance in Springfield, Ohio, filed criminal charges against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance based on their baseless fear-mongering, quote unquote, about Haitian immigrants eating neighbors' pets. In Ohio, private citizens can file an affidavit charging criminal offenses, and the court must either issue an arrest warrant or refer it to the prosecuting attorney for an investigation. So yes, this Soros-backed organization is trying one last-ditch effort to have Donald Trump and J.D. Vance thrown in jail purely on the basis of their speech. Because Donald Trump and J.D. Vance said unflattering things about the tens of thousands of Haitian migrants that have descended on a small town in Ohio, the Haitian Bridge Alliance believes that they belong in jail. And some employed in a prominent position by a U.S. media outlet, Katie Fang of MSNBC, has no problem with this. She calls it a fascinating legal move. Now, as it turns out, the Soros family has been making a lot of these fascinating legal moves lately. As Daily Wire reported this week, George Soros is backing a network of left-wing organizations that's working to naturalize and mobilize immigrants and refugees ahead of the upcoming election, with the express purpose of, quote, swaying the outcome of national, state, and local elections. That last line is a direct quote from the website of New American Voters, which is an arm of the National Partnership for New Americans. And that group describes itself as a national, multi-ethnic, multiracial partnership network of 60 of the country's leading immigrant and refugee rights organizations. So it's also received more than $500,000 from Soros' organizations. And their explicit goal is to sway American elections using mass migration. And this is one of those things that you're told is never happening. But if you go on their website, you'll see it's happening right in front of you, and they admit it. So you can see why acquiring an ownership stake in a bunch of radio stations might be helpful to the Soros empire. When you basically control the NGOs and the activists, it helps to also control the media too. And that way you magnify the message of these NGOs and activist organizations. MSNBC and CNN are already doing that for Soros at the national level. The radio stations could do it at the local level. They can spread the news that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are racists who belong in jail for even mentioning that replacement migration is underway in places like Ohio. They could promote the many district attorneys who have received huge campaign contributions from Soros, only to then turn their cities into crime-ridden hellholes. This is the kind of scrutiny that Democrats hope to avoid by fast-tracking this latest acquisition by the Soros family. The party that claimed to be terrified of foreign election interference for the past 6 years is now fully embracing a massive and unprecedented campaign of election interference by George Soros. The people who say that their opponents are a threat to democracy have no problem importing millions of voters with the explicit goal of influencing and swaying, in their words, elections. The only way that hypocrisy like this can survive is by total media blackout. No one can be allowed to talk about what's happening. Media outlets will have to fall silent. And after what the FCC just did, in secret and in defiance of their own rules, that's exactly what we can expect between now and November. And that is why the Soros puppet masters and all of the puppets dancing on their strings are all today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
The stage is set. The stakes are sky high. Senator Vance, Governor Walz, face off. But who will land the knockout punch? Don't watch the debate alone. Experience it with the most trusted names in conservative media. Daily Wire Backstage brings you unfiltered commentary, biting wit, and expert analysis you won't get anywhere else. Join Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Clavin, and Jeremy Boring for a debate night you'll never forget. Daily Wire Backstage, Tuesday, October 1st, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, only on Daily Wire Plus.